The Boeing 747 shuddered at 37,000 feet, its passengers oblivious to the shadow racing beneath the clouds. In row 9, seat C, Valentina Reyes balanced a tray of champagne flutes while the aircraft bucked through turbulence that shouldn't exist at this altitude. Her billionaire employer, tech mogul Marcus Aldridge, was hosting his usual mid-flight poker game in the cabin's converted lounge, his laughter echoing over the drone of engines that sounded wrong to ears trained in a different life. The first flute shattered against the mahogany table as the plane lurched violently left. Through the porthole, Valentina glimpsed something that made her blood freeze, the distinctive diamond silhouette of an F-22 Raptor, its angular stealth geometry cutting through wisps of cirrus like a predator's fin through water. Then another appeared on the starboard side, close enough that she could see the pilot's helmet turning toward their aircraft. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," came the voice over the intercom, steady, but with an undertone that made Valentina's military instinct snap to attention. "We're experiencing some minor navigation issues. Please remain in your seats." Valentina set down the remaining glasses with practiced precision, her movements economical despite the aircraft's increasingly erratic behavior. The billionaires at their poker table continued their game, insulated by wealth and ignorance from the reality unfolding around them. She moved toward the cockpit, her feet finding purchase on the carpeted deck with the unconscious balance of someone who'd once landed jets on pitching carrier decks in storms that would terrify these people. The radio crackled to life on an emergency frequency she recognized, one that wasn't supposed to be audible in the passenger cabin. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Viper Lead. You are in violation of restricted airspace. Respond immediately or we will consider you hostile." Aldridge looked up from his cards, his face pale beneath his tan. "What the hell is going on?" Through the speaker came another transmission, clearer now. "Civilian aircraft bearing 270, squawk 7700 and prepare for escort. We know who you are, Ghost Rider." The champagne glass in Valentina's hand exploded against the floor. Ghost Rider. A call sign she'd buried 12 years ago along with her flight suit and the nightmares that came with it. A call sign that belonged to a different woman, one who'd earned her wings in places that didn't officially exist and had flown missions that were never recorded. The F-22s closed formation, their presence no longer subtle but declarative. Through the radio static came a voice she recognized, Colonel Martinez from her old squadron. "Ghost Rider, we need to talk." The private jet belonged to Marcus Aldridge, but the woman serving drinks in its cabin belonged to the sky itself, and the sky was calling her home. Valentina Reyes had spent 12 years pretending to be someone else, but at 37,000 feet, with two of the world's most advanced fighters bracketing her position, pretense became impossible. The F-22s held station with mathematical precision, their pilots invisible behind dark visors, yet she could feel their eyes on the aircraft like physical weight. In the main cabin, panic was beginning to set in among Aldridge's guests. Senator Crawford from Texas was demanding answers while pharmaceutical heiress Diana Chen clutched her pearls and spoke rapidly into her phone. But their voices faded into background noise as Valentina focused on what mattered: the subtle vibrations in the deck plating, the pitch of the engines, the way the aircraft responded to atmospheric pressure at this altitude. Captain Morrison's voice filtered through the intercom again, professional calm cracking at the edges. "This is American Airlines flight. Excuse me, this is Aldridge 7 requesting immediate clearance to nearest suitable airport. We have a situation developing." Through her earpiece, a discreet communications device she'd never quite brought herself to discard, Colonel Martinez's voice cut through static like a blade. "Negative on airport diversion, Ghost Rider. We need you to take the stick." The words hit her like a physical blow. She closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of decisions settling on her shoulders. 12 years ago, she'd been Captain Valentina Reyes, United States Air Force, call sign Ghost Rider, with more combat hours than most pilots accumulated in their entire careers. She'd flown missions into Syrian airspace that never appeared in official logs, had danced with Russian Su-57 over contested territory, while diplomats pretended such encounters never happened. Then came the incident, the mission that went sideways, the court-martial that ended in quiet resignation and sealed records, the promise to never fly military aircraft again in exchange for a clean civilian record and her freedom. "I can't do this, Martinez," she whispered into her earpiece. "You're the only one who can," came the reply. "We've got a stolen B-2 Spirit inbound to major population centers. The pilot's gone dark, and our interceptors can't get close enough without risking nuclear payload detonation. We need someone who's flown against stealth before." The mention of nuclear payload made her knees weak. A B-2 Spirit bomber, the same aircraft she'd spent her final active years helping to develop countermeasures against, was now a rogue element carrying city-killing weapons. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Your flight pattern recognition skills were too distinctive to hide. We've been tracking your suggestions to corporate pilots for years. The way you guided that emergency landing in Denver last year, pure Ghost Rider." Aldridge appeared beside her, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "What the hell is happening? Who are these military jets, and why are they talking about my waitress like she's—" "She's not your waitress, sir." Colonel Martinez's voice came through the cabin speakers now, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's the best damn pilot who ever wore Air Force wings, and right now, she's our only hope." The F-22 to starboard dipped its wing in a gesture of respect, a salute between warriors. The weight of command settled onto Valentina's shoulders like a familiar uniform. She looked at Aldridge, at his terrified guests, at the luxury surrounding her that had become both prison and sanctuary. Through the windows, the F-22s waited with patient menace, their pilots understanding something the civilians couldn't, that in the next few minutes, their world might end or be saved by a woman they dismissed as hired help. "Martinez," she said into her earpiece, her voice carrying the authority she'd buried for 12 years. "What's my authorization level?" "Full presidential authorization, Ghost Rider. You are weapons-free and mission-critical. Rules of engagement are at your discretion." She closed her eyes and felt the aircraft around her. Not just a luxury transport anymore, but a potential weapon in the hands of someone who understood the physics of flight at a level few humans ever achieved. When she opened them again, the woman who had served champagne was gone, replaced by the warrior who had earned her call sign in the dark corners of aerial warfare. "Copy that, Control. Ghost Rider is back in the game." The transformation was immediate and total. Valentina's posture shifted from deferential service to command presence as she strode toward the cockpit, her movements now carrying the controlled aggression of a predator. The billionaires in the main cabin fell silent, instinctively recognizing the change in her demeanor, even if they couldn't understand it. Captain Morrison looked up as she entered the flight deck, his face pale beneath his captain's bars. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to—" "Stand down, Captain." Her voice carried absolute authority. "Colonel Martinez, patch me through to NORAD command." The radio crackled with encrypted signals as high-level military communications networks activated. Through her earpiece came the voice of General Harrison, a man she'd thought she'd never speak to again. "Ghost Rider, this is Cheyenne Mountain. Confirm your status." "Operational and ready, sir. Brief me on the situation." At 800 hours this morning, B-2 Spirit designation, Dark Angel, failed to respond to recall orders during a training exercise. The aircraft was carrying a full nuclear payload, 2 B-83 warheads. Pilot Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Wade went radio silent over Nebraska. "We've been tracking him heading southeast, but stealth technology makes visual confirmation nearly impossible." Valentina felt ice in her veins. She knew Wade, a competent pilot but volatile, recently divorced, financial problems, security clearance under review. The kind of personal crisis that could break a man carrying nuclear weapons. "Sir, with respect, why not just shoot him down?" "Because we don't know his target, Ghost Rider. If he's planning kamikaze tactics, forcing him down could trigger detonation over populated areas. We need someone who can get close enough to talk him down, or, if necessary, disable his aircraft without catastrophic payload release. Through the cockpit windows, she could see the F-22s maintaining perfect formation. Their missiles were visible under their wings, AIM-120 AMRAAMs and AIM-9X Sidewinders, weapons she'd helped test during her active years. But against a B-2 carrying nuclear weapons, those missiles were useless unless used with surgical precision. What makes you think I can do what your interceptor pilots can't? Because you've done it before, Ghost Rider. Syria, 2013. You talked down that Russian pilot carrying chemical weapons over Aleppo. You got close enough to a hostile aircraft to disable its systems without destroying it. We need those skills now. The memory hit her like physical pain. Major Dmitry Volkov and his Su-34, loaded with sarin gas canisters, planning to level a refugee camp. She'd matched his flight pattern for 47 minutes, staying in his blind spot while talking him through his crisis of conscience. When words failed, she'd used her aircraft as a surgical instrument, disabling his weapons systems with a precision strike that left him alive, but unable to complete his mission. It was the mission that had made her legendary. It was also the mission that had destroyed her career when intelligence leaks revealed unauthorized engagement with foreign military assets. I need control of this aircraft, she told Captain Morrison. The captain looked at General Harrison's authorization codes appearing on his screen. With visible reluctance, he vacated the pilot's seat. She's all yours, ma'am. Valentina settled into the captain's chair, her hands finding the controls with muscle memory that transcended conscious thought. The Boeing 747 felt different now, not a luxury transport but a tool, an extension of her will. Through the windows, the F-22s adjusted their formation, their pilots recognizing the change in their escort's behavior. Viper Lead, this is Ghost Rider. I'm taking primary control. Form up for intercept vector and prepare for combat air patrol. Copy that, Ghost Rider. Good to have you back. The transformation was complete. The woman who had served drinks was gone, replaced by the warrior who had earned her wings in the crucible of secret warfare. Above them, the sky waited with infinite patience, ready to become battlefield or graveyard depending on the choices made in the next few hours. Valentina pushed the throttles forward, feeling 4 massive engines respond with a surge of power that pressed everyone in the cabin back into their seats. The hunt for Dark Angel had begun. The Boeing 747 banked hard left as Valentina aligned their course with the projected flight path of the stolen B-2. In the cabin behind her, Aldridge's guests were thrown against their restraints, their world of privilege and comfort suddenly subject to forces beyond their control or comprehension. She ignored their protests, focusing instead on the tactical display that Colonel Martinez had transmitted to the aircraft's navigation system. Ghost Rider, this is AWACS Sentry, came a new voice through her headset. We have Dark Angel on scope, bearing 185, altitude 42,000, speed 580 knots. Estimated time to population center, 47 minutes. Valentina studied the projected course on her display. Wade was heading directly for Atlanta, 2.5 million people in the metropolitan area. If he intended a nuclear strike, the casualties would be unprecedented in American history. Can you confirm pilot intentions? She asked. Negative. All communication attempts have failed. However, we're picking up intermittent radio transmissions from the cockpit. Sounds like he's talking to himself. The psychological profile painted itself in her mind. Wade was a 14-year veteran, decorated combat pilot, but his personal life had imploded. Divorce, custody battle, financial ruin, and now facing disciplinary action that would end his career. She'd seen it before, competent people pushed beyond their breaking point, making decisions that their rational mind would never consider. Patch me through to his frequency, she ordered. Ghost Rider, be advised. Protocol suggests maintaining operational security. Direct communication could compromise. General Harrison, with respect, protocol got us a stolen nuclear bomber heading for Atlanta. Let me try something that might actually work. After a moment's hesitation, You're authorized for direct communication." The radio crackled as her transmission reached the stealth bomber. "Jackson, this is Valentina Reyes. We served together in Afghanistan. Remember that night in Kandahar when you beat me at poker and I claimed you were cheating?" Silence stretched across the airwaves. The F-22s held formation around her aircraft, their pilots listening to an attempted miracle. Behind her in the cabin, even Aldridge's panicked guests had fallen silent, sensing the weight of the moment. "Valentina," Wade's voice came through static, confused and hoarse. "Is that really you? They said you were. What are you doing out here?" "I'm trying to talk some sense into an old friend who's making a very bad decision." "You don't understand. They destroyed everything. My career, my family, my life. They gave me the nuclear codes and now they act surprised when someone uses them." Through her earpiece, she could hear the command center at NORAD tracking every word. General Harrison would be analyzing psychological profiles, preparing contingencies, weighing the cost of military action against civilian casualties. But she knew something they didn't. Jackson Wade wasn't evil, just broken. "Jackson, I know about losing everything. I know about having the system turn against you after giving it your best years. But this isn't the answer." "Easy for you to say. You disappeared into civilian life. You got out clean. They court-martialed me for following orders, then blamed me when the mission went sideways." The familiar weight of survivor's guilt pressed against her chest. She'd escaped the military justice system that had destroyed Wade's career, but only by accepting exile and silence. Her freedom had come at the cost of watching good people like Wade suffer for decisions that weren't entirely their own. "Where are you planning to go, Jackson?" "Somewhere they'll pay attention. Somewhere they'll remember what they did to us." "Atlanta, definitely Atlanta." The tactical display showed his course unwavering, his altitude holding steady at optimal bombing parameters. In 34 minutes, he'd be in position to level the city center. "And after Atlanta, what happens after you've killed 2 million innocent people?" "After," his laugh was bitter and hollow. "There is no after, Valentina. This is where it ends." The realization hit her like a physical blow. Wade wasn't planning to survive his attack. This was suicide by nuclear weapon, taking a major American city with him. The psychological profile suddenly made perfect sense. A man with nothing left to lose, choosing to make his death count in the most destructive way possible. Through her headset, General Harrison's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Ghost Rider, we need options. Can you disable his aircraft?" She looked at the tactical display, calculating distances and angles. The stolen B-2 was 47 nautical miles ahead, flying a rock-steady course toward Atlanta. Her Boeing 747, despite its size, was faster and more maneuverable than the stealth bomber. The F-22s could provide support, but ultimately this came down to her skills against Wade's desperation. "Jackson," she said into the radio, "I'm coming to get you." Through the cockpit windows, she could see the F-22s adjusting their formation, their pilots preparing for aerial combat unlike anything in their training manuals. Below them, the Georgia countryside spread out in a patchwork of farms and small towns, peaceful communities unaware that their existence hung in the balance at 40,000 feet. Valentina pushed the throttles to maximum power, feeling the massive aircraft surge forward like a hunting predator. The chase was on. The Boeing 747 screamed through thin air at 600 knots, its 4 massive engines straining beyond normal operational parameters. Through her headset, Valentina could hear the constant chatter of military coordinators tracking their progress while evacuating Atlanta's city center. The scope showed Dark Angel 23 nautical miles ahead, maintaining course and altitude with mechanical precision. "Ghost Rider, this is Viper Lead," came the voice of the F-22 formation leader. "We've got visual confirmation on the target. Dark Angel is running dark, no navigation lights, minimal heat signature. Without you, we'd have lost him in the ground clutter." Valentina adjusted their intercept angle, drawing on combat experience she'd hoped never to use again. The stolen B-2 was visible now as a barely perceptible shadow against the star field, its angular geometry designed to defeat radar and visual acquisition. But she'd studied stealth technology for years, learning to spot the telltale signs that even advanced camouflage couldn't hide. "Jackson, I can see you," she transmitted. "Your starboard engine is running hot. You're leaving a thermal trail." "Stay back, Valentina. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to." The threat wasn't idle. The B-2 carried defensive systems capable of engaging pursuing aircraft, and Wade was desperate enough to use them. Through her tactical display, she could see weapons systems activating on the stealth bomber, countermeasures that could down her aircraft or the escorting F-22s. "Sir," came Captain Morrison's voice from behind her, "my passengers are asking about emergency procedures. Should I prepare for?" "Your passengers are the least of our problems right now, Captain." She keyed her microphone. "NORAD, this is Ghost Rider. I need current population density for potential impact zones." "Copy, Ghost Rider. Atlanta metropolitan area, 2.8 million in primary blast radius, additional 4.2 million in fallout zone, assuming worst-case detonation scenario. Evacuation is underway, but civilian authorities estimate 6 hours minimum for effective displacement." 6 hours. They had maybe 20 minutes before Wade reached optimal attack position. The mathematics were brutally simple. There was no way to evacuate nearly 7 million people in time to prevent catastrophic casualties. "Jackson," she tried again, "talk to me about Sarah and the kids. How are they handling the divorce?" The radio went silent for so long she thought she'd lost the connection. When Wade finally responded, his voice was thick with emotion. "She took them to her mother's in California. Won't let me see them. Says I'm unstable." "Are you unstable?" "I'm flying a nuclear bomber toward a major city while talking to a woman who's supposed to be serving drinks on some rich bastard's private jet. You tell me." Despite everything, Valentina almost smiled. Wade's sense of humor was intact, which meant his rational mind was still functioning underneath the desperation. That gave her something to work with. "The woman serving drinks was never real, Jackson. She was just cover, a way to hide from what we used to be." "And what were we, Valentina?" "The best damn pilots the Air Force ever produced. Weapons of precision and judgment. We never missed our targets and we never killed innocents. That was our code." Through her scope, she could see the B-2 beginning a gradual descent toward bombing altitude. Wade was transitioning from cruise to attack configuration, his weapons systems cycling through pre-strike protocols. In her earpiece, she could hear NORAD coordinating with missile defense systems, preparing to attempt an intercept that would likely trigger the very nuclear detonation they were trying to prevent. "I'm not the same person anymore," Wade said. "The system broke me, turned me into something I don't recognize." "Then let me help you remember who you really are." Valentina began to close the distance between their aircraft, the massive Boeing 747 gaining on the stealth bomber with surprising grace. The F-22s maintained escort position, their pilots understanding that this was beyond their capability now. This required the kind of flying that existed somewhere between skill and art. "I'm coming alongside, Jackson, just like old times in formation training." "Don't do it, Valentina. I can't guarantee your safety." "Since when do we guarantee safety? We're pilots. We calculate risk and make decisions. Let me fly with you one more time." The two aircraft, one a luxury transport pressed into military service, the other a nuclear-capable bomber flown by a broken man, began the most dangerous formation flying in aviation history. Ahead of them, Atlanta's skyline was beginning to appear on the horizon, a cluster of lights representing millions of lives hanging in the balance at 40,000 feet. Formation flying at 40,000 feet required absolute precision, but Valentina was matching the B-2's every movement with mathematical exactness. The stolen bomber's angular surfaces created turbulence that would normally make close approach suicidal. But she'd studied stealth aerodynamics during her active years, learning to read the invisible air currents that flowed around radar-absorbing composites. Jesus Christ, Valentina. Wade's voice came through the radio, tight with professional admiration despite his psychological state. How are you holding formation in that passenger bus? Same way we held formation over Damascus when those MiGs were trying to lock onto us. Physics don't care what kind of aircraft we're flying. The Boeing 747 settled into position 50 feet off the B-2's starboard wing, close enough that she could see Wade's silhouette in the bomber's cockpit through her enhanced optics. The F-22s had dropped back to a respectful distance, their pilots understanding that what was happening now transcended normal tactical doctrine. Through her tactical display, she could see Atlanta approaching at frightening speed. 15 minutes to optimal bombing position. The city's emergency broadcast system was cycling through evacuation instructions, but highways were already gridlocked as millions of people tried to flee simultaneously. Talk to me about the mission, Jackson, she said. What's the primary target? CNN Center. Symbolic value. Maximum media impact. They want to know what broken veterans are capable of. I'll show them. The target selection revealed Wade's psychological state with clinical precision. He wasn't trying to maximize civilian casualties. If that were his goal, he'd choose Hartsfield-Jackson Airport or the downtown financial district. CNN Center was about sending a message, forcing the media to cover veteran suicides and military justice failures through the lens of nuclear terrorism. And after you level the CNN building, what happens to Sarah and the kids when they find out their father was a nuclear terrorist? They already think I'm a monster. At least this way, they'll remember why. Valentina made a decision that violated every safety protocol she'd ever learned. She nudged her aircraft closer to the B-2, reducing separation to less than 30 feet. At their current speed, any minor control input could result in collision and mutual destruction, but she needed Wade to understand the physical reality of what she was proposing. Jackson, look at me. Through the bomber's cockpit windows, she could see Wade turning toward her aircraft. Even through the tinted transparency, their eyes met across the gap between wings, two veterans who had shared the brotherhood of aerial combat now facing each other in its most lethal application. I'm not leaving you alone up here, she said. This isn't your fight, Valentina. The hell it isn't. We're wingmen, that means something. In her earpiece, General Harrison's voice was urgent with barely contained panic. Ghost Rider, recommend you increase separation immediately. Current positioning is extremely hazardous. She ignored the command, maintaining the dangerously close formation. Through her peripheral vision, she could see Captain Morrison gripping his seat restraints, his face pale as he watched two nuclear-capable aircraft dancing at the edge of catastrophe. Wade, I need you to transfer control of your weapons systems to my aircraft. That's not possible. Security protocols don't allow. Emergency authorization codes. You've got them. I know because they gave them to you when you took off this morning. Transfer weapons control to my aircraft, and I'll carry the responsibility for what happens next. The radio went silent except for static and the background noise of military coordination efforts. Atlanta was 12 minutes away now, its skyline growing larger through the cockpit windows. Below them, the geometric patterns of suburbia spread out like a circuit board, each cluster of lights representing families who had no idea their lives hung in the balance. Why would you do this? Wade asked finally. Because that's what wingmen do. We share the load, we share the risk, and sometimes we share the guilt. Through the darkness between their aircraft, she could see Wade working at his control panel. After several long seconds, her weapons console lit up with indicators she hadn't seen in 12 years. Nuclear payload status, arming sequences, detonation parameters. Wade had transferred control of 2 city-killing weapons to a woman who was supposed to be serving champagne to billionaires. Weapons transfer complete, he said. What now? Valentina looked at the nuclear authorization controls, feeling the weight of decision that had ended her military career and could now end her life. The codes were simple, a few keystrokes that would arm weapons capable of erasing Atlanta from the map. Now we decide together. what kind of pilots we really are. The formation held steady, two warriors suspended between Earth and stars, carrying between them the power to destroy a city or save it. The choice would be made in the next few minutes, at altitude and speed, with precision that would define both their legacies. 8 minutes to Atlanta. The twin aircraft held formation as Atlanta's skyline expanded before them like a constellation fallen to Earth. Through her weapons console, Valentina could monitor the nuclear payload status. Two B-83 thermonuclear warheads, each capable of destroying everything within a 3-mile radius and contaminating hundreds of square miles with radioactive fallout. The responsibility felt heavier than the aircraft itself. Jackson, I'm reading thermal buildup in your number 3 engine. You're running redline on all parameters. How long have you been pushing maximum power? Since takeoff. Figured I wouldn't need the engines after Atlanta anyway. The casual mention of his own death sent chills through her. Wade was flying a machine worth $2 billion like it was disposable because, in his mind, everything was disposable now. The aircraft, the city below, his own life, the lives of everyone in the blast radius. Through her earpiece, NORAD's communications were becoming increasingly frantic. Ghost Rider, we show weapons transfer complete. Confirm your intentions. Stand by, Control. She keyed her radio to Wade's frequency. Jackson, I want you to think about something. Remember Lieutenant Torres from our squadron? The kid from El Paso who used to send all his pay home to his family. Miguel, yeah, I remember, good pilot. What about him? He died over Syria, surface-to-air missile. But before he went down, he managed to guide his aircraft away from a school, saved about 300 kids and died for it. Never made the news. No medal ceremony, just another training accident in the official records. Wade's voice was quiet when he responded. Why are you telling me this? Because that's what we do. We protect people, even when nobody knows about it, even when nobody thanks us for it, especially when nobody thanks us for it. The tactical display showed 6 minutes to optimal bombing position. Below them, the evacuation of Atlanta continued, but the highways were completely gridlocked now. Emergency services estimated less than 30% population displacement in the primary blast zone. If Wade proceeded with his attack, the casualty count would still reach into the millions. Easy words, Valentina, but Miguel got a hero's death. Clean, simple, me? I got court-martialed for following orders and then thrown away like garbage when the mission went sideways. There's nothing heroic about dying forgotten and broken. Then don't die forgotten. Help me save Atlanta, and everyone will remember Jackson Wade as the man who stopped himself from becoming a monster. Through her scope, she could see Wade's aircraft beginning to adjust its descent profile. The B-2 was transitioning to bombing configuration, weapons bay doors cycling through pre-opening sequences. In less than 4 minutes, he would reach the point of no return, the moment when nuclear release would be both inevitable and successful. I've got weapons bay opening on Dark Angel, came Viper Lead's voice through the tactical net. Shall we attempt intercept? Negative, Viper Lead. Maintain distance. Valentina made another decision that defied all logic and safety protocols. She rolled her Boeing 747 inverted and dropped underneath the B-2, positioning her aircraft directly beneath the bomber's weapons bay. If Wade released his nuclear payload now, the warheads would impact her aircraft first, potentially preventing ground detonation, but certainly destroying everyone aboard the luxury transport. What the hell are you doing? Wade's voice was sharp with alarm. I'm making sure you have to kill me first if you want to nuke Atlanta. In the cabin behind her, Captain Morrison was struggling to maintain control as passengers experienced the disorientation of inverted flight. Aldridge and his guests were strapped into their seats, faces pale with terror as they realized their hired help had just positioned them directly in the path of nuclear weapons. This is insane, Valentina. You're not military anymore. You don't have to do this. Neither do you, Jackson. That's the point. Through her inverted canopy, she could look up at the B-2's weapons bay, seeing the angular shapes of nuclear warheads in their deployment cradles. The physics were simple. If Wade released now, the weapons would destroy her aircraft first, possibly preventing ground burst detonation, but creating an aerial nuclear explosion that would still devastate the metropolitan area. 2 minutes to release point, came the automated voice from Wade's bomber. Jackson, I need you to make a choice. Either you kill me and 7 innocent civilians to get to Atlanta, or you help me figure out how to land this aircraft safely. You're bluffing. You won't really sacrifice yourself and those passengers. Try me. The silence stretched across the radio waves like a physical thing. Below them, Atlanta continued its desperate evacuation, while above them, the F-22s maintained their helpless vigil. This had moved beyond military tactics into something more personal, 2 veterans working out their relationship with honor and sacrifice at nuclear gunpoint. 1 minute to release point. Valentina waited, maintaining position directly beneath the weapons bay, her aircraft steady despite the aerodynamic nightmare of flying inverted in formation with a stealth bomber. Everything depended now on whether Wade could remember who he used to be before the system broke him. Jackson, I'm here. What's it going to be? 30 seconds to weapons release. The fate of Atlanta, and perhaps the southeastern United States, hung in the balance between 2 aircraft locked in the most dangerous formation flight in aviation history. Release point in 10 seconds, came the automated countdown from Wade's bomber. 9, 8, 7. The weapons bay doors of the B-2 opened fully, revealing the sleek profiles of 2 B-83 thermonuclear warheads suspended in their release cradles. Valentina maintained position directly beneath the bomber, her inverted Boeing 747 serving as a human shield for the city below. Through her canopy, she could see the nuclear weapons with crystalline clarity, city killers waiting for the electronic signal that would drop them toward their target. 4, 3, 2. Weapons safe, Wade's voice cut through the countdown. Weapons bay closing, I'm aborting the run. The relief hit her like a physical blow. Through her earpiece, she could hear celebration at NORAD, but she remained focused on the immediate situation. Wade had made the right choice, but they were still flying 2 extremely valuable aircraft in an impossible formation, with nuclear weapons aboard and fuel running low. Good call, Jackson. Now help me get this formation safely separated. The delicate process of separating their aircraft began with microscopic control inputs. Valentina gradually increased her vertical separation from the B-2, rolling her Boeing 747 back to level flight, while Wade adjusted his course away from Atlanta. The F-22s moved in closer, ready to escort both aircraft to a secure landing. Ghost Rider, this is General Harrison. Outstanding work. We're vectoring you both to Dobbins Air Reserve Base for emergency landing. Emergency services are standing by. But as they began their approach to the airbase, Wade's voice came through the radio with a tone she'd heard before. The sound of a man who had glimpsed salvation, but couldn't believe he deserved it. Valentina, you know this doesn't change anything. I'm still facing court-martial. My career is still over. My family still won't talk to me. She looked across the gap between their aircraft, seeing Wade's silhouette in the bomber's cockpit. The man who had just chosen to save millions of lives was already talking himself back into despair. Jackson, you just prevented nuclear terrorism. You think that might carry some weight with the review board. Or they'll say I was the one who stole the bomber in the first place. Either way, I'm done. Through her headset, she could hear General Harrison and his staff coordinating Wade's reception at Dobbins. Medical personnel were being briefed on psychological crisis intervention. Security teams were preparing for the transfer of nuclear weapons, and intelligence officials were already crafting the official narrative for what would undoubtedly become one of the most classified incidents in military history. Jackson, she said, I want you to do something for me. What? When we land, I want you to ask them to let you call Sarah. Tell her what happened up here. Tell her you chose to save people instead of destroy them. Tell her you remembered who you used to be. The approach to Dobbins Air Reserve Base was surreal in its normalcy. 2 aircraft carrying nuclear weapons and the power to have destroyed a major American city, were being guided to landing by air traffic controllers who spoke in routine, professional tones. Below them, the lights of suburban Atlanta spread out peacefully, millions of people returning to their homes, unaware that they had come within minutes of nuclear annihilation.